Hey guys, if you've seen any of my previous videos, you know that I haven't posted in a very long time. And some people reached out to me and said, "Hey John, why'd you stop posting?" So what I want to do today is to address why I actually started in the first place, why I stopped, and why I'm back. So originally I started posting videos because when I purchased my FP, there was really no one else talking about it. There was a handful of people on YouTube like Steve Huff that did some reviews, but really the industry pretty much panned it. You didn't see anything on social media. There was really nothing on YouTube, and it would be a good 8 to 10 months before some other YouTubers even tried to review it or take a look at it. And most of the major YouTube channels simply ignored it. And so I wanted to kind of create this community where people who had the same gear or were interested in it could, collaborate and share their experiences and their knowledge or ask questions. It'd be great. So that's why I originally started it. Now, why did I stop? And it really has to do with two things. First, obviously, is COVID. Like many of you, it impacted my life dramatically many times over the last 18 months. It's been this big zigzag path, but I'm through it and things are great. But the other thing that impacted it was the fact that Sigma had changed its strategy. So originally, I had not planned on purchasing the FP. I had actually set aside my money to purchase the full-frame Foveon camera. For those of you who know me, I'm a big fan of the Foveon experience, and that's what I was actually going after. But then the FP kind of dropped out of nowhere really quick. And in hindsight, I think they did it to try to get ahead of the bad news that they knew they were going to have to deliver about the Foveon. But when it came out, I'm like, hey, you know what? This is a camera that's built for video predominantly. And I'm going to be buying the Foveon, which is going to be 100% photography based. And they both share the L-mount glass. And so I can get glass and build an ecosystem around this where one camera will be for basically video and one camera will be specifically for photography. And it sounded like a great idea. And I knew it was a risk, but I went for it. Purchased the FP, started to use it, started to make some videos. And then Sigma made their announcement that the Foveon was delayed. And I'm like, okay, delays in technology happens, but I got concerned because it was odd. They simply stopped talking about it. Usually when there's a delay, they're still releasing specs. They're showing pre-production models or renderings. They just flat out stopped talking about it. And we know why, because a couple months after that, they announced the indefinite suspension of the Foveon project. Now, at that point, then I had to decide, what do I really want to do with this camera? Do I want to make the investment in the native L-mount glass that I need? Because it's the only L-mount camera I have. I don't own a Panasonic. I don't own a Leica today. So if I make all this investment and it doesn't work out, I'm kind of stuck with this glass I can't use. Does that make sense? And then, of course, COVID hit, and it really put everything into a hibernation mode. During that time, however, I still was going out and doing some shooting, in the middle of nowhere with nobody around, and it was still producing good results. I was still happy with what the camera was doing. But I didn't know whether or not it was worth making the continued investment in. And then Sigma made two announcements later that year. The first is that they had a new series of glass, the I series, and the second is that they had a new camera coming out. And I was like, oh, Sigma, you're pulling me back in, because I loved the 45 millimeter I series that came with the FP. In fact, most people did. It gets very good reviews. I love it for the same reason that I love my Fuji glass, right? This X series glass. When I went from a full frame DSLR to a APC mirrorless camera, I went with a smaller camera because I wanted a small camera, but I also wanted small glass. And so it had to be glass that was small, but built well and optically performed and at a price that made sense for me. And Fuji just fit all those check marks, and I'm very, very pleased with it. Well, the Sigma I series is really the same kind of strategy. It's small glass, built extremely well. It's got the aperture ring. It performs optically very well. And again, it's, relative, right? I say relatively not expensive, but everybody has a different budget. But for me, it works out okay. So I went ahead and said, fine. I bought the other three pieces of I-series glass and waited for the new camera to come out. Now, a lot of people were optimistic. They were thinking that it was going to be the new full-frame Foveon camera. I was hopeful, but really didn't believe that. And sure enough, it came out, it was the FPL. Now, for those of you that I've had conversations with, you know that I felt that the big Achilles heel of the FPL for hybrid shooters was the lack of a mechanical shutter. No mechanical shutter means you're not going to be able to have a usable sync speed, so no strobes. And you're going to be susceptible to rolling shutter effect, and you're going to be susceptible to banding under artificial light. This is just what happens with electronic shutters. They've gotten so much better over the last year, but until we get to a global shutter, you're still going to have these challenges. The other thing that I always asked for was a modular EVF. Now, when Sigma made their announcement about the FPL, well, they addressed one of these. They gave me the EVF that I wanted. Still have the no mechanical shutter, and there never will be given the design of this camera. And I'm okay with that with the way that I shoot. And we'll talk about this in follow-up videos, but that was okay. Then they gave us some extras, some more resolution, some more features, and it was more video or more photography centric. So I said, okay, fine. I'm going to go all in. I'm going to do the FPL, make it my photography special project camera. I'll use my FP, just put it in the cage. It will be dedicated to video. And I've got this L mount glass that I can share. Life is good. So why am I back? Well, for the same reason that I started the channel in the first place, right? To share common interest around this particular gear, around the FPL and the FP. For other people who own it or are interested in it, to be able to answer questions, to be able to try things, to be able to share in our victories, to commiserate in our defeats, because we will definitely have these with this camera. The second reason is that I own the Sigma FPL, right? I purchased this with my own money. It's not like other YouTubers. They didn't send this to me for 2 weeks to review it. It's not sent by a camera company. Sigma doesn't even know I exist. So I purchased this with my own hard-earned money, and I have to make this thing work at least for the next year or so as my special projects camera. So hopefully you're gonna come along for the ride and see how that actually turns out. And then finally, the last thing is I really want to talk about the changing space of photography. And I think a lot of you have the same feelings that I have. That not so much with video, right? Video is still an evolving space, but in photography, I think we've reached this point where this race to pixel perfection is really giving us diminishing returns. And I think now more than ever, having an artistic voice and artistic vision is so much more important than having technical excellence. So hopefully you guys will join me along for this ride. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's probably more important than ever that people get together around common passions, support each other, give that optimism, give that positivity. There's so much negativity in this world today that we need to look for these little pockets where we can kind of lift each other up. And I think this is one of those environments where we can do that. So again, please join me for the ride. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. Thanks.